Welcome back to the Talking Devils podcast, brought to you by togetherness.co.uk, your number one independent Manchester United podcast. It's Friday. That means it's time to talk about Manchester United. I'm joined here today by former Manchester United player Phil Marsh. Here today to talk all things Manchester United. Most importantly, it's here. It's Derby weekend. It's the Manchester Derby this Sunday. Manchester City versus Manchester United at the Etihad Stadium and live on Sky Sports 2 o'clock. So we're here today to predominantly talk about the Manchester Derby upcoming this weekend. We'll also be talking about team news. We will also be talking about Cristiano Ronaldo. We'll be talking about Erik ten Hag, the impact he's made this season, and so on and so forth. So do smash like the video, guys. Do hit that subscribe button. As always, we do appreciate your support. As always, Phil, international breaks obviously have to happen. We've had a bit of time off. As United supporters, it's been, well, I suppose in my book, international break was wild for me because Ireland played Scotland. That was a mad game, and then we had what should have been a game against Armenia, which should have been I suppose, guaranteed 3 points. My blood pressure has gone up. Ireland didn't do too well in that game. Contrast to yourself, you had England, who've got relegated now down into our group in the Nations League. As well. So like our countries didn't do too well during the international break. But how are you feeling about the return of Manchester United this weekend, considering the international break wasn't too good to us?
Yeah, obviously buzzing to sort of get the domestic football back. I think it's been international weeks always sort of for me. I've never really been a massive fan of international football, if I'm being honest. But I watched obviously the England games and sort of, the performances wasn't great. I think they had a little bit of a spell against Germany the other day, which, they looked impressive, but again, couldn't see the game out. So looking forward to seeing Man United and hopefully we can pick up from the form that, we were showing, especially in the league before the break. And I'm hoping that we can continue that into what's going to be a tough game, obviously, against Manchester City.
Yeah, we've been on great form, especially the last 4 games before the international break, and obviously we the unfortunate passing of Queen Elizabeth, which did kind of halt Manchester United's season. Obviously 2 games been called off as well, and so Man United really in the Premier League in earnest, more or less they had a month off, so like this. Like you could look at it 2 ways in terms of this break. It can benefit Erik ten Hag by obviously having time on the training pitch for players, but there's training and there's playing games, and I suppose coming off a long layoff, you're going straight into the Manchester Derby. It's uncharted territory for Erik ten Hag. Obviously, like look, he hasn't had a derby game yet. This is his first derby, and it's probably not ideal circumstances that he's coming in there with such a long layoff.
Yeah, I mean, as a player, I always used to hate it when you have a long break. I mean, obviously some players need the rest because they're playing a lot of games during the year. But for me, I used to always enjoy, right, when's the next game, and just sort of keep rolling and riding that wave of playing football. I think, for certain players, it's probably been a good thing so that they can, work on certain things on the training ground. The managers had a chance to have a look and have a chat with certain players who's not been on international duty. So I think that'll have been a benefit for certain players. But yeah, for me, I think, in terms of having such a long break now in the league, I think the players should be chomping at the bit. And obviously there's no bigger game to be going into than, up against, your local rivals who have been in, pretty good form, let's say, with the signings they've made, the looking formidable this year. And I think, it's going to be a massive ask for us to, get a result. But I think with the way we have been playing sort of post the Brentford and Brighton games, I think we've, been really solid. And as we touched on, the back four's now settled and we're looking more like a team and a unit. And players are starting to build them relationships. Whether that's come a little bit too soon maybe for this game, we'll have to wait and see. But we've certainly turned the corner from where we was.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, like, I think the international break did come at a kind of a bad time. But I think in contrast, when we look at the form that we displayed post Brentford and Brighton, we've seen more organisation, we've seen togetherness, we've seen in I suppose in stages, like, progress and patterns of play. Now, obviously, it still isn't full-fledged Eric Ten Hag style of football. It isn't that yet, but we have seen progress under him. And look, I think we've seen improved performances from a lot of players, and even some players who've previously been very good. They've obviously regained form as well. Obviously, what you mentioned, like Sir Rafael Varane, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, players like that have regained form from like previous clubs. And then you have players who've underperformed them previously, like Scott McTominay, Diogo Dalot, and they've really picked it up. So I think that's a testament to the manager. I think it's a testament to the manager, not just himself, but the coaching staff, but also I think you have to give the players a bit of credit as well for like the last couple of weeks, because to pick yourselves up from rock bottom, like literally, if you look at the 25 games before the Liverpool game, we've only had like a couple of wins in that 25 game spell. And I'm including that at the end of last season as well in that as well, because like if you look at the Brentford and Brighton game compared to like the other 20 odd games in the Premier League, they were carbon copies. So to see the players pick themselves up from it, trying to get themselves back up to reach that level again, I think it's a testament to the players, the coaching staff, and the manager as well.
Yeah, again, I can only echo what you said there. As we've said, being at such a low point after the first two games, it's obviously something that the players have shown character. The manager's obviously, got a lot of credit to take from that. I think, picking a bunch of players up from, losing your first two games when, expectations were high, and, he's obviously came into the club to change the philosophy and try and, give players a better chance of succeeding. I think, we couldn't have had a worse start, and to sort of see where we are now. And obviously giving players sort of, a new lease of life, if you like, with certain players who's, found some really good form, getting that back force settled and sorted, which I think, is a foundation. And, it's when you look at more successful teams, that's the sort of first and foremost thing that you need, a back four that's all, reading off the same page and playing together on a regular basis. We seem to have that now. And as you've just touched on there, certain players have started putting in the performances that they've, shown in certain games, but far too inconsistently. And we've seen that a lot more in the last sort of month and a half with some of the performances, and that needs to obviously continue and carry on if we're going to be, up there challenging and hopefully, trying to get a trophy in the cabinet at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think look, picking themselves back up was very important, like in terms of progress, because if you look at the slump that we're in, like for a lot of teams, it was like if you look at their form, it was relegation form that we were in at that time. And now there was premature talks, not by to a lot of people, but sensationalism that Man United were in a relegation battle at the start of the season. Now look, that was again sensationalism, that wasn't fact. But the form we did display over that 25 game spell was relegation form, and to see the players and the manager and all that pick that up, and this team right now is unrecognizable compared to what the team at the start of the season. And I like when I look at the trajectory of this football club at the minute, there's still a lot wrong. There's still a lot wrong, especially when you look at the business side of this football club, like the owners and the board and things like that. Look, that's a long-term problem, but look, that's not something that change has been effective immediately. Obviously, look, there's takeover talk happening. There's obviously consortiums, there's Jim Ratcliffe, people who are interested in buying the football club. And when that news came out, that was a very positive light, but that's going to take time. And look, the Glazers leading the football club, look, from the reports this week, 4 members of the Glazer family want to sell. There's only one person that wants to keep the club. That's Joel. So, look, where he can be coerced into selling the football club, time will tell. But if you look at different parts of the football club, the playing side of the football club, it's in a very positive state at the moment. Not just the men's team, but the 21s are playing very well. The women's team are doing fantastic as well. So I think from the playing side, for once, I think in the last kind of 12 to 18 months, we've had a very positive outlook on the season. And even some players who've been dead and buried in terms of not being part of the manager's plans, they've revived themselves. we've seen the fan base have confidence again talking about the team, which, if we be honest, and be brutally honest, there was a lot of apathy last season. Like there wasn't much positivity at all. Even like the games that I remember like at one point last season, we were talking about Norwich at home. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that preview. Now, I did give like a big score prediction that day, but if you look at the rest of the talk that we did say in that podcast, none of us were even confident win that game. Now, that's no disrespect to Norwich City or anything like that, but that's just where we were at that time. Like the football wasn't great. Ralph Ragnick was literally slandering everyone at the football club, from board to the players to everybody. And like the players weren't running. There was a lot wrong. But to see now that we're covering ground, to see that like when players are going into challenges, they're celebrating challenges, they're getting each other up for it. And when I look at that, like that's a team I can recognize. That's a team who I can buy into. That's something that I think for supporters of the football club, you want your players making effort. You want your players showing desire. Obviously, you want the substance behind all that as well. You want the quality. But I think, like, if you look at the last 4 Premier League games, and look, the Real Sociedad game was a bit of a. I give that as a free pass because there were so many changes made, and the situation that day that happened as well. Like that game, I'd almost write that off. And considering we did go on and win against Sheriff, but like if you look at the Premier League games plus the Sheriff game, like we've really played really well. And this team is unrecognizable compared to the tripe that we watched last season. So like I'm very, very happy at the state of our football club at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we've just touched on it there, but obviously the biggest thing for me is now with the team that we're putting a shift in, and I've said this loads of times, over the past year and a half on the podcast. If you don't work as hard as the opponents, then it doesn't matter how much talent you've got on the pitch. You're not guaranteed to win the game. If you're putting a shift in, and we've got the quality that we have in the changing room, we've got a great chance of winning football matches. And I think that's been the biggest difference for me, certainly in this last period of games, what we've just touched on there, as well as having a settled back four and a settled team. I think just the overall work rate and the overall sort of team spirit, and as you just said there, celebrating tackles and all that kind of thing. I think that's been massive. We've lacked that for such a long time at the club, and I think now getting that sort of team spirit and atmosphere and winning mentality, and getting a few leaders and players who want to put the body on the line, I think that will definitely have a massive difference, and it definitely rubs off on other players, because not every single player has that in the DNA, and not every single player is the type of player that wants to throw tackles in and put the body on the line. But it's contagious when you see it happening, and there's players around you that are doing it and all that kind of thing. I think that's been a massive sort of thing that's happened in these last, certainly in these last couple of weeks. Like some Martinez and players like that who are putting tackles in and leading by example on that front. And I think it's rubbing off on the rest of the team. And as I say, I think that is the sort of starting block that you need for any successful team. You can have all the talent you want and all that, but if you don't put a shift in and you don't work as hard as the other team, then you're never gonna win over a long period of time.
Yeah, especially look, if you're getting results but you're not working and it's individual brilliance, it's not sustainable. And we've seen that last season, and we've seen how in games where teams had a bit of cohesion that we were caught. And to see kind of Erik ten Hag bring this team back to basics, and as you mentioned, to see us have a defensive structure again, to see togetherness, and to see players when things are going wrong, if we can see the goal, that everyone doesn't drop their heads, that there is still there's camaraderie there that wasn't there. So I think that's massive credit for that. But again, it's one of them situations now where we hope, look, let's say, not like we're going to be negative here, but let's say the result doesn't go the way we want on Sunday, that doesn't capitulate into a downturn in results. That look, we've previously seen in the past, when a big result doesn't go our way, we've seen a capitulation before. But look, let's hope like whatever happens, that togetherness, that desire does stay there, because I think like Manchester City aside, because like look, I do think, look, regardless how we both feel about that football club, they are a brilliant football team. They have a brilliant manager. They have brilliant players. Any team in the world is going to find it hard going to the Etihad, but at the same time, I like to think, look, all of our players are going to be up for it this weekend, literally from that first whistle. Like for me, I want to see Scott McTominay stick one on Erling Haaland, literally in that first minute or two in the game. Like I want to see that happen. Joe, just let him know that we're here, and we're here to be competitive. Like for me, I just want to see this team go out and really show what it means to be a Manchester United player. And look, if it means we do it in vain and we don't win the game, so what? We go out and the fans get get that effort, get that support. And look, we go out and we put out a good performance. But we've talked about kind of the positivity around the football club, obviously, in the last kind of, I suppose, 6-7 weeks, post kind of the Liverpool game. Obviously, in the last 24 hours, Eric Ten Hag has got manager of the month, and Marcus Rashford has got player of the month in the Premier League. Now, if you want, we talked about players who were in the pits and down in the dumps. Marcus Rashford, we had a conversation at the start of this season where we didn't know if he'd even play under Ten Hag. He looks like he's come in, he's back to his best, and like, what do you make of him getting player of the month now, considering where he was, let's say, last April or May?
Yeah, I think that's a massive confidence booster for himself. I think, obviously, as we've just touched on there, he was the back end of last season, certainly. He looked like he was running on empty. His confidence was shot. He didn't really seem as though he wanted to be on the pitch, if I'm being honest. I think, his body language wasn't there. His work rate wasn't there. But yeah, certainly, this season now, he's came back. He sort of, a new lease of life. I think the manager's certainly, had a word in his ear and sort of give him maybe an arm around the shoulder to sort of make him feel like he was still wanted and had a, role to play within the squad. For me, I think he's been, brilliant. I don't think he's quite, I don't think he's quite found the sort of Marcus Rashford that we know's in there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
but he's definitely shown glimpses of that, and I think he's looked a threat. He's looked like he's got that bite about him again. He's got sort of the fire in the belly, and he looks a lot more like the player that we've all seen, and that's a great sign. And I think, obviously, getting the Player of the Month award for him is probably testament to all the hard work that he's putting over the pre-season, and I think that's going to do his confidence wonders. And obviously he's done well notoriously against Manchester City, especially at the Etihad in previous years. So it's come at a great time, and I think if you can take that into the game on Sunday, then we've got every chance, because on his day he's unplayable, and we know what he can do. We've got players who can find him, pick a pass. Bruno's given him some fantastic balls this season. And he seems to have found his finishing boots again. So let's hope that he can carry on this form that he's been showing. He can still improve. I'm not saying that he's back to the complete player that we've seen, but I think he's definitely heading in the right direction. And as I say, from where he was last year, a miraculous turnaround, and probably one that not everyone would have seen, me included in that. I think I wouldn't have at this point in the season said he'd have been picking up Player of the Month awards after the way he was last year. So you've just got to give him a massive pat on the back with that. And again, some of that credit must go to the manager, because I think he's had, a big impact on Marcus, and, certainly the confidence is definitely back.
Definitely. I think, look, the manager does deserve a lot of credit for the resurgence of Marcus Rashford. And look, I agree, he's not the Marcus Rashford we've seen in the 1920 season or 2021 season, but we're seeing glimpses of that. And look, we're seeing him work a bit harder. We're seeing him get his mojo back. Like, he's taking on players again. He's not giving up if he doesn't dribble past them once or twice. Though he's not giving up where we looked last season. If he didn't dribble past a player during the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of a game, he'd be anonymous. And he wouldn't try, and every time he'd get the ball, he'd pass it back into Fred or McTominay. But what we're seeing now is he takes on the player now, he beats the player, and he's a threat again, and he's scoring goals. Look, and I think that Player of the Month has come at really a great time. It really has, because we're going in now to a very crucial period in their season. I remember last season, our October was we said last season defining. And look, again, I think this October is also season defining because it's 9 games in 29 days. Like, that's a lot of football. A lot of football. Like, domestically and in Europe as well, and Carabao Cup. Obviously, that's next month, actually. That's November, sorry. But like, if you look at it, like Premier League and Europa League, there's a lot of football there, and it's going to be season defining. So to see Marcus get shooting boots on and really come back into form, I think that's we do need that, considering like Cristiano struggles this season, considering Anthony Martial has been injured for more or less the whole season so far. Like, so, like, to see, Marcus pick it back up now at this stage of the season, it is very good to see. Look, and again, he's not there yet, but the thing about it is, and what I will touch on is, he has an authoritarian type of manager who won't leave him rest on his laurels after win this Player of the Month, because Ten Hag is a very strict figure. And I don't think Ten Hag would be like, look, well done, Rashi. Now, look, that's it. You're Player of the Month. You've made it now again. Like, Ten Hag would be saying, like, look, we want you to win it next month. We want you to win Player of the Year. Like, I think when you look at this situation with Marcus Rashford, I think he has the right manager. Now, that's not to say that Solskjaer wasn't the right manager, because I think Solskjaer really helped his development after it stagnated under Mourinho. Like, if you look at like Rashford and Mourinho, like, especially in that kind of last season before Mourinho got sacked, like, his development really stagnated. Then when Solskjaer came in, Marcus had statistically had his best seasons at the club under under Solskjaer. And even last season, before Solskjaer was sacked, Rashford was still scoring goals. So we know he has it in his locker, even in periods of time where the club struggles. So if Erik ten Hag can obviously be here all season and Marcus can stay fit, I do think we can see that same Marcus Rashford. Again, it's going to take time as Ten Hag's ideas develop over the season. Obviously, you have Jadon Sancho there, you have Anthony there, you have Martial, who's also back now as well, you have Cristiano, you have Alanga, you have Garnacho. There's so many different players who can play in all these positions that I think competition is going to make them better. You'd like to think that the competition will make them better and make them thrive.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you just said, with the wanting to win Player of the Month next month, I think that's the kind of mentality that Ten Hag's instilling in all these players. I think you've seen massive turnarounds in form from a lot of players who, as we've said, then weren't performing on a regular basis to the level that they needed to be. And we could name 4 or 5 players now who's playing with, McTominay's been one, Rashford's certainly been one. I think Bruno's been brilliant. Obviously, Varane and Martinez have been outstanding. And I think that's down to the manager now with the sort of, winning mentality, creating that environment in the changing room, which we haven't had. The training regime must have changed from, not been down to the training ground, or I don't actually know what they're doing at the training ground, but I can just tell that the training regime has definitely changed from the performances on the pitch. Because no matter what team you play for or who you are, your training replicates your performances, and we've definitely sort of seen the sort of benefits of that in the recent couple of weeks that we've seen the turnaround in performances. So I think it's a massive boost for everyone. And as I say, the Manchester City game won't define the rest of our season. I think if we do, end up getting beat against Man City, but we put a good account of ourselves and, we make it difficult for them and we don't just roll over and, die, then, there's plenty more games, as you just said, 9 games in the space of 3 weeks, plenty of football to be played. And I think, there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be needed in this period. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see, if some of these other players who haven't been playing, the likes of Shaw, Maguire, Ronaldo, all these players who are going to be needed in this, period of time, whether they've still got the correct mentality to come in and perform and want to be part of the team, and obviously not in the starting team at the moment, but have they got that mentality to want to come in and, prove the manager wrong, I should be starting, or whether it's, I'm just coming in and I'll play when I'm, needed. I think it's going to be, I'm quite intrigued really to see sort of some of the reactions from certain players that have been used to playing so much and getting in that comfort zone of, regardless of performances and, regardless of, their own individual mistakes, they've still been getting picked under previous managers. Now, this has happened and Ten Hag's had that ruthless streak where he said, right, this is my team. I'm picking certain players. He's made them big calls. It's paid off. But when they are recalled and they are put back into the team, I'm going to be sort of interested on what the sort of reaction to this is, and whether it's a positive one or whether it's going to be a one what's telling me that they want out of the club.
Definitely looking like I like to point out Luke Shaw on that, because like I've seen how he played for England against Germany. Now, to be fair, like to be fair to him, he's trimmed down. Like he looks like he's lean again. Like he looks fresh. He looks like the Luke Shaw we've seen under Ollie. In that, especially in that game, looking at his latest physique, he looks like he's getting back to kind of what we know Luke Shaw to be when he's on the top of his form. I'm hoping that Malasia's emergence now has kind of kicked Shaw up the arse now, and it kind of gives him that extra kind of step to challenge Malasia, because we remember when Tellez came in that that really kicked Shaw up the backside, and like look, his form came back. Like I'd love to see them two battle it out for the left back position, because two of them have two different skill sets. Where I think Malasia is probably better defensively, but I think Shaw's probably better on the ball than Malasia. And Malasia provides more overlaps, which gives Rashford more space to cut in, or Sancho to cut in. But I think Shaw will probably be a better crosser of the ball. And so like there's different like skill sets that these two fullbacks have. And especially like even if Ten Hag wants to go to a back three, like it'd be interesting to see would he use Shaw as left sided centre back, or like would he pull like even he moved Malasia over to right back the other day. Do you know what I mean? Which back in my mind, I'm thinking if I'm Aaron Wan-Bissaka and I seen that happen the other day, I'm thinking my career's over. But when I see Luke Shaw and Malasia, I think them two can really push each other this season. Because they have two different skill sets. They're two like on their day, like especially Luke Shaw. If you want to talk on their day, because look, we've seen Malasia since he's come in, he's been good, so we can't really say like he's in a poor vein of form yet. Where we can say on his day, but Luke Shaw on his day, like he is a brilliant left back, a brilliant left back, and one of the best in Europe. And people might disagree with that, but if you look at the season when he did, get into United's team full time, and he was one of the best left backs in the league this season. United finished second. He was also the best left back in the European Championships as well, scoring the European Championship final. So we know Luke Shaw has these big performances in him, and I'm hoping just with this Tyrell Malacia, breakthrough that this really does push Shaw now to kind of regain form and get back to himself.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to the competition within the dressing room and on the training ground. And I think now that we have got a bigger squad and we have got that healthy competition and players, wanting to get into the team, I think it's great because when you look at all the best teams in Europe, they've got two or three players in every position who are worthy of the shirt. But it's whoever's got the shirt, can they keep the shirt? And if they can't, then there's players ready to come in and step in and take that off them. And I think the manager has definitely sort of, said that, and he's give everyone the opportunity, he's give everyone a chance to sort of keep the shirt. And I think, the players at the moment in time have played that well, that they're sort of undroppable. People were saying about Casemiro coming in and McTominay coming out of the team. But for me, I think McTominay's been one of our best players and more than worthy of his starting shirt at the moment. So, when you think of it, not many people would have been thinking that, Casemiro coming from Real Madrid with, all the Champions Leagues and stuff he's won, and you've got Scott McTominay keeping him out of the team. So that's where we're at the moment with the players that we've got. Everyone's playing so well because it's a settled team, because the team spirit's there. We're winning games, the managers, doing things on the training ground. These players are going to have to be patient, and when they do get their opportunity, they're going to have to take it. And it's a great position to be in, and as a manager, that's a good headache that you want to have, really, because you don't want players who are out of form, sulking because they're not playing. You want players who are on the training ground, trying to prove a point in training to get themselves into that starting 11. And whether it's an injury or a squad rotation in a different competition, when you get that opportunity, when you get that chance, it's about taking it, showing the manager what you can do, having the right attitude, not letting people know that you're disappointed because you're not in the team. And I think, as I just said, then I think that'll be interesting with the certain players that I've mentioned, to see what kind of reaction and what kind of performances we see from them, because obviously, being used to playing week in, week out, and being undroppable, if you like, and invincible in certain people's eyes, maybe. These players now are sort of finding themselves on the bench and not playing, and it's about how do you react to these times where you're in sort of a little bit of diversity. And I think it's one of them where, for me, you've got to just try and do everything right. You've got to try and prove a point and show the manager that you still want to be part of the team. But yeah, it is going to be interesting. We've got a lot of games coming up, so they're definitely going to be needed in this period. And I'm hoping that they are here for the long run, and they do want to be part of the squad and part of the team. And in football, injuries can happen, and suspensions, and you never know when your next opportunity is going to come. So it's about just digging in and staying with it. And as I say, we've got a lot of games, so it's going to be interesting to see.
Definitely is going to be interesting to see. Look, there's players who, as I said quite rightly, they've played a lot of football previously, and now they haven't played this season. So I think this is time for them to dust themselves off and look at what these other players are doing, and they'll see how they can improve their game, and they'll push to get into the 11. One thing I'd like to see within a squad is players pushing each other, and having a healthy competition, and not being bitter towards kind of others doing well. It's a situation where you should look at the form of the others and think, right, how do I do better than this lad this week? Like, if you look, for example, like years gone by, like if you look at United's forward line, let's say, for example, years ago, if you look at 99, like you had Cole and York, but then you had Solskjaer and Sheringham pushing them to the absolute max to make sure that they're performing every week. And when Solskjaer and Teddy Sheringham both came into the team, they'd score goals, and they'd really keep Andy Cole and Dwight York on their toes. If you look in 2008 when we won the double that season, we Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, and then you had like the other players in there on the forward position, such as Jason Park, Ryan Giggs, players like that who could definitely come in and around that area, and Nani as well, like who come in and challenge these top players to make them maintain their performances. But when Nani or Park came into the team, they came in and played well. Like Gary Neville was a stalwart at right back for years for United, like years on end. One of the most consistent right fullbacks you'll see in Premier League history. Wes Brown came into that team when Gary Neville had a long-term injury. And Brown isn't a natural right back. Brown came in and done a fantastic job. John O'Shea would often come in and do a job in centre back, midfield, right back, left back, God's sake, in goal even. There's players in there who had their mentalities to push others. But when they came in, they've done a job. And I think our whole squad as a whole need to learn how to do that now as well.
Yeah, and I think that, as what you just said there, I think it's that when players are coming in and stepping in, and you've got your main players that are playing on a weekly basis, but then when the other players do come in, it's as if nothing's changed, and that's down to the right attitude, the right mentality, being part of a team, application, dedication to want to keep turning up to training and trying to prove and break your way into the team. And you've mentioned some great examples there, as you say. Players who's playing every week, but then when they it might not be their day in front of goal. Maybe when you're looking at York and Cole in that period, Sheringham or Solskjaer would come on and they'd score the goals in the last 20 minutes, and that'd be the difference that would win the game. Whereas you look at certain players and certain teams now where they're making substitutions and they're not having any impact on a game, and I think that's purely based on their own ego, not having the right mentalities to, think that they shouldn't be on the bench, they should be starting, coming on and just, not having the right mentality to want to try and help the team and sort of, their own sort of personal agendas, if you like. And I think if you're part of a successful squad and a successful team, a manager's main job is to try and keep everyone happy, which, is a very difficult job at any level of football, because you can only pick 11 players. Every single player wants to be on the pitch. But for me, I think certainly in this next couple of weeks with so many games that we've got, it's going to be a massive part of whether we're going to be successful, because the players that are going to be needed and, coming on and, because of the quick turnaround of games, I think, for a lot of teams, this period now will show who's got the, most healthiest dressing room with team spirit, players all reading off the same sheet, managers being able to motivate players and individuals themselves wanting to, prove in the right way to the manager that they should be playing.
Definitely. I think, look, at this moment in time, if you look at the rebuild and look where all the other clubs are at the moment, and not even just referencing old United, you look at Man City at the minute, and because they're opponents, we will reference them at the moment. Like, you look at the amount of forward players they have, right? Look, at the moment, if you look at their whole team, right, at this moment in time, players who are undroppable, Ederson, right, Kevin De Bruyne, Ruben Diaz, and even at that, Ruben Diaz probably isn't droppable because they have so many good centre backs. And Bernardo Silva and Holland, they're probably the undroppable players in that crop right now.
Cancelo, maybe as well.
Cancelo, actually, I forgot about him as well. Cancelo, yeah. Oh, definitely him, 100%.
Yeah.
But you look at the rest of their team. None of the rest of them players are undroppable. Like, Pep, rotates to suit whatever he wants for that particular skill set of the opposition team. And that's what Fergie used to do as well, down the years. So I think, look, if you look at the top teams at the minute, the top teams of past, who have the best teams and who win the most trophies and who are the most successful, you need competition for places, and you need that throughout your team, not just in the forward areas or your midfield. You need it in your defence, you need it even in the goalkeeping department as well. In that regard, Van der Sar had Ben Foster, as the backup goalkeeper, and Thomas Kuszczak, back then, who were decent keepers. Albeit Van der Sar was top class, unbelievable. But he still had competition. He knew he had a keeper who, if they were called upon, would come in and do a job. David De Gea at the minute is probably at a loss with Henderson being gone. That look, you have Dubravka and Tom Heaton at the minute, who at the moment they are very good goalkeepers. But if you look at that kind of world class level, they probably aren't there to come into the team and probably perform at David De Gea's standard that he has set. So that's where I look at different parts of the team. I look at the defense, I look at the midfield, and look at the forward line. I'm hoping that these players can push each other to that next level where where most of them aren't undroppable, that other players can come in and do that job. And look, it's just we'll have to wait and see kind of what happens with this team over the next couple of months and really see where we are in this rebuild. Because look, as we said, there's a lot of games, especially this month, and there's 9 games in 29 days. These players, this squad, is going to be tested to its limit, to its core. So look, I'm hoping that everyone can have the right mentality when they are called upon. Look, that they don't kind of moan and bitch about not playing the previous weeks. That it is a case that they come in and do a job and try to push others around them to do better. But we have talked about United quite a bit on this podcast, and obviously, look, with it being the Manchester derby, we are playing Man City, who are I know Arsenal are top of the league at the minute, but if you look at the overall teams in the league, they're still the best team in the league, in my opinion. What have you made of their start so far this season, and also, I suppose, the new dimension that they have in Erling Haaland up top?
Yeah, well, I think, if I'm being honest, this season, I think for me, Manchester City win the league quite comfortably. I know they're not top of the league at this moment in time, and they have dropped a couple of points, but I think in terms of the rest of the season and the strength and depth that they've got, I think they will run away with the league this year. I just think they've got that much quality, and as I say, the competition, the manager, he doesn't settle for anything less. He has all the players, fighting for the shirt. He has all the players, when they're on the pitch, working the socks off. And I think now with the sign of Haaland in somebody who's going to score 35, 40 goals a season, it's took them to the next level for me. I think he's somebody who will, he can do everything. He's got, the speed, he's got the strength, he can finish, he can run in behind, he can come link up the play. And with the service that he's going to get, from the likes of Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne and Foden and Mahrez and all these players, that he's got around him, it's going to be, a scary prospect for any team really that's coming up against Manchester City. So for me, I think this season for them, they should win the Premier League at a canter. But I do think on the day, you can get at, it's been proven. I mean, Villa, picked up points against them. Newcastle's picked up a point against them. I think, they're not, invincible. You've got to try and, do the basics well. They're going to have a majority of the possession against most teams, but you've got to make the most of it. And we've done that in the past on the counter attack. And I think, this Sunday, I think that's going to be the biggest test for us, whether we can take that form that we've shown, especially against Liverpool, that tenacious bite that we had. Martinez getting into Salah early. I think you touched on it before about someone giving Holland a little, nudge early doors just to let him know they're in the game.
McTominay,
yeah, and that's all part of it. And I think some of these players, if you give them the freedom of the park, they're going to hurt you. It's it's not rocket science, but if you do get into them and you do get about them and you can have that little bit of quality yourself, we've definitely got more than enough to get a result. But as I say, it is a formidable ask because they are such a good team, and as I say, every single player in every position. Man City's probably second string would probably finish in the top four. So that's how good of a squad they have got. But again, yeah, I think I'm quietly confident that we can get a result on Sunday. But I do think they will win the league quite comfortably this year.
Yeah, look, when it comes to the title race this season, I don't think there is one. I think Man City will win the league at a canter this season. I just look at their consistency and how they can string so many wins together. I don't think any team is on that level at the minute. Now, people can talk about Liverpool, but I think Liverpool are, look, they've had many injuries. Their season's a bit stop-start. And when I look at like players such as Van Dijk and that, Van Dijk isn't Van Dijk in 2019 at the minute. Like you can see he's kind of slowing down. Salah hasn't found his shooting boots yet, and if Liverpool want to be anywhere, he needs to find them sooner rather than later. So like when I look at other teams, I don't think Spurs are ready. I don't think Arsenal are ready. Chelsea are a bit unstable. New owner, new manager now. Like they're not going to challenge for the title this year. United are still building. So, like, I look at the league for City this year. It's probably going to be the easiest season for Manchester City to win the title.
I think though, on the flip side of that, I think obviously you've just said City are going to win the league at a canter, but I think the other three spots for the top four is going to be a really, really interesting and brilliant sort of race for me. I think you just touched on a few of the teams there: Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, Liverpool, United. I think that's going to be a really tough three places that are up for grabs there between them clubs. I think we're all at a pretty similar level and a pretty similar position in terms of we're not all where we need to be at this moment in time, but there's been lots of signs of positive stuff that's going on for each club, and I think that's going to be a really, really interesting race for the top four places this year. I think it's going to be quite exciting, that, and I think it's something that Man United are more than capable of doing with the form that we've been showing. Again, it's just down to consistency and trying to keep that level on a weekly basis and not letting the odd defeat here and there really affect us and turn into 2 and 3 and 4 games where you're dropping points. I think that's the best sign of any team at the moment is when you do have a bad result, how do you bounce back from that? And how do you, get that run started again? And it's all about, ticking the games off and trying to just keep the momentum of performing well, winning games. And when you do have that, bad result or bad performance, not letting that fester and carry on into, other games, other competitions, and just, discarding it as quickly as you can, get it out of the system and move on to the next game.
Definitely. I think, look, when you look at the consistency, I think especially our second, third, and fourth place, and even like I'll go fifth because the Europa League, like as well, like all these teams are going to have to be consistent because you have other teams who are kind of chomping at the bit, such as like Newcastle, who are doing very well under Eddie Howe, like teams like that, Wolves, teams like that who will they kind of chomping at the bit to try to upset the top six. So I think like you look at these teams like likes of us, Tottenham, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, we're all going to have to be on our game this season, like to get European football, this season. Look, hopefully for us, we do get into the top four. I actually quite fancy our chances get into the top four. Like if we keep going on the trajectory that we're going on now, I do fancy us to get at least the third or fourth in the table. Start of the season, I predicted a sixth, but when I look at like the new signings who've come in, and like look at the way Ten Hag has us organised and playing, I do think United can finish in the top four this season. And if not, if we narrowly miss out, I do think the Europa League is definitely something that United can win this season. When you look at like the opposition that we would have, you look at the players we have, and if you look at like when Jose first came in, he won the Europa League, and that was a great springboard for the next season when he finished second. Now, unfortunately, the owners didn't back him in that third season, and look, that's history now. Like when you look at that, but all in all, we've seen that continued progress. If Ten Hag had that trajectory, and hopefully plays better football in that time, it could be something better. But we have a comment in here. Thoughts on Holland versus Martinez, Phil? I'll leave as a striker yourself. What are your thoughts on this potential battle that we may see on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. As I say, I think Haaland's definitely got the height advantage. I think Haaland's going to be a handful for any defenders this year. But I do feel as though Martinez, the way he goes about his business and the way he is as a player, I think he's going to be quite clever, and I think he will land one on him early doors and let him know that he's in for a game. And obviously the partnership he's got with Varane now, I think them two have, got it sussed. I think obviously it's going to be difficult, don't get me wrong. The supply line that they've got, and he's a world-class player. It's going to be difficult for any defenders in world football. But for me, I actually think he's, a really good defender, and I think he's a type of defender that Haaland probably wouldn't want to play against. I think he's tenacious and he doesn't give you a minute. He's very good in the air for his size. He's quick and he's good on the ball. So it's going to be an interesting battle. I think they've definitely got their hands full with Haaland, but I think the way that them two have been playing in certainly the last few weeks and the partnership we've got, I think at this moment in time, I'd back them two lads to try and keep him relatively quiet. He's going to get chances. He's going to inevitably have some impact on the game. But for me, I think at this moment in time, if you look at centre back in the Premier League, which pairings would you say would maybe have a go at keeping him quiet? I think Varane and Martinez would probably be in the top three. So for me, yeah, I'm confident, and I think them two will be looking forward to the challenge. You want to play against the best players, and test yourself against the best. So I'm more than confident that them two lads, the way they've been playing, can do a job and hopefully keep him quiet.
Yeah, hopefully he can be a kind of a reincarnation of the Ajax versus Dortmund game in the Champions League, where he absolutely pocketed Haaland in that game. But look, Haaland is a fantastic striker. He's a brilliant, brilliant player. There's no surprise United wanted him. He was on our radar. And look what he's done with City since the start of the season. It's been fantastic. But also what Martinez has done. He's had a great start to the season. People can talk about Brentford and Brighton, but if you look at the highlights, it wasn't his fault about them goals, but I'm not going to go there. In that situation. But like if you look at like Martinez, he's probably one of the most informed centre backs in the league, probably alongside like Thiago Silva, Romero, centre backs like that who've played really well this season. And Martinez is definitely up there. And it's interesting, the dynamic of obviously Haaland's physical structure, Martinez's football brain, and getting into them positions, being tenacious. Like it's a good contrast in styles of players, and it'd be interesting to see what happens. And as I said, like look, if you have Casemiro or McTominay or both in the team, I dare to say one of them are going to stick one on Haaland early. One of them three players is getting booked anyway. Casemiro, McTominay, or Martinez. One of them are getting booked. So if you're doing your bet this weekend, like one of them, you have to back 100%. One of them.
I think actually Keane as well. The more pressing question for me is Haaland's obviously going to have an impact on the game, but I think if we can cut the supply line off to him, so your De Bruyne's and your Bernardo Silvas, I think that is where the game's probably going to be won and lost in that midfield battle. I think them players I've just mentioned are going to be the key to Manchester City, obviously, trying to create things. And I think, this season. We've already seen that partnership that De Bruyne has got with Haaland, and the movement that he's got in and around the box. We're gonna have to make sure, that we try and get around them and get sort of in their face and not give them time to pick them balls out. And as we've said, it's going to be a massive ask because they are such a good team, and the movement that they've got, players interchanging and all that kind of thing. I think it's going to be a massive day for whoever's playing in the middle of the park. I think McTominay or whoever it is in there has got to have the game of their life if we are going to get something out of that game, because they are that good. We need to make sure that we're limiting the amount of possession and amount of passes that they're getting into Haaland, because inevitably if he keeps getting the service, he is going to score goals. We've seen that, and we know how good he is at finishing. So yeah, it's going to be a big ask, but I'm confident of the way we have been playing, and the players we've just touched on there. Martinez and McTominay have probably been two of our best players.
Yeah, definitely. And it'd be interesting to see kind of how both of them perform and how they get on against Man City. And on that, Phil, you've just brought me to my favourite part of the show, is our starting 11 and score predictions. Now, just putting it out there, obviously Lee isn't here to join us today, unfortunately, so we won't have Lee's score. We have Lee's score prediction, but we don't have his starting 11. So it will be just myself and Phil today picking United's 11s here today. So I'll go to you first, Phil. Give us your starting 11 formation for tomorrow for Sunday.
Okay, so I'm going to go De Gea in net, same back four, Dalot, Varane, Martinez and Malacia, McTominay, Eriksen, Bruno, and then I'm going to go Sancho, Rashford and Martial. I think Martial obviously been injured and not played a lot of football, but I just feel as though this is probably a really good game to bring him back in. He's done really well against Man City in the past. I think the performances that he's shown in pre-season and the games that he has played this season, he's looked like a new player to me. I think I've been a bit of a critic of his since he joined the club. Obviously he's a fantastic player on his day, but he's never really done it on a consistent basis. For me this season and what I've seen in pre-season, he's looked the player that I wanted to see for years. So I'm hoping that he can carry that form on, and I think this game is a game that will suit him as long as he's doing the basics right and he's working hard and he's getting involved in the game. And obviously Man City are going to have a lot of the ball. We are going to need the players to put a shift in defensively as well, all over the park if we are going to get something from the game. But I think that's the team I've gone with, that I think we've got the best chance of getting something from the game.
Yeah, look, I think that 11 could be very close to what we get. I think midfield, I don't know, I'm a bit unsure of, but I'll go with my 11 now as well. I've gone obviously De Gea in between the sticks. Same back four, obviously Dalot, Varane, Martinez, Malacia. I think Luke Shaw, you could play him, but I think Malacia doesn't deserve to be dropped just yet, obviously. I think Shaw could come in at some stage during the season, but I think it'll be the same back four. My midfield has gone slightly different. I've gone with a midfield three. I've gone McTominay, Casemiro, and Eriksen. I think Fernandes could be key if we're still in the game in the second half, and I think Bruno Fernandes as a substitution when the game is a bit more open and Man City are a bit more tired. I think Bruno could be very key to being that match winner. I think if we play that midfield three of McTominay, Eriksen, Bruno from the start, I think we could, if we concede early, we could be in massive, massive trouble. Considering the gap, I think between kind of midfield and defence, I think we could be in a trouble. So I think that's why I'm going to go McTominay, Casemiro, and Eriksen, because I think Eriksen's ball retention is better than Bruno's from that aspect, and I think having them two in there, we'd be nice and solid. And I think we could. I think having one of the two of them could also help Martinez out with a physical battle, with Haaland as well, in that regard. So that's where you know, that's where I'd go midfield. Just before I go my front three here, Dan is in the comments here, regular viewer of the show. Dan says, "Sorry lads, 18th birthday celebrations. Missed this, but we'll watch later. If Rashford is fit, I suspect he'd be up top over Ronaldo." Yeah, I do agree with that as well. And happy birthday to your son as well, Dan. I've seen you had it on Twitter there as well. Good, nice old United cake there as well. So yeah, happy birthday to your son, Dan, and hope you have a good weekend, pal. But yeah, like my front three then, I was debating this all day, obviously, the post Eric Ten Hag's press conference, because like in the press conference, he's come out and said Martial and Rashford are fit. Now, if anyone who follows me on Twitter was watching here, I shared 2 11s last night, and I had either Bruno false nine or Langa up top because of the options that we had. Now my front three is a whole different kettle of fish now. I've gone Anthony on the right, I've gone Rashford on the left, and I've got Martial up top. Now, the only difference, obviously, Phil has Sancho, I have Anthony in my thing. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of, I'm looking at 2 forwards who can cut in, obviously, Anthony and Rashford from either flank, and I'm looking at obviously Dallo and Malacia overlapping with from the fullback's perspective. I think that's the way I want to go, and I think in terms of like link-up play, I think that could do very well. Obviously, like, look, you have to look at it from the perspective of, one of the reasons I probably went with Anthony ahead of Jadon on the right is Cancelo's threat going forward. I think Anthony, like, tracking back-wise, would probably track back a bit more than Sancho, just a small bit more. I think his aggressiveness could disrupt Cancelo window as well. So that's why I went Anthony on that one. And look, again, I think Rashford and Martial being both fit, I think they picked themselves in this style of game. Like, we've seen how good them two have linked up against City before and how they've been good against City. Like, last game Martial played against City, he gave Diaz and Laporte absolute nightmares at the back. So, like, that's why I've went with that as well. But, like, look, if he goes with Sancho in there, like, he did score against him last season, he did do well against him last season, so I wouldn't be disappointed if Sancho came in for one of the three, whether it's Martial, Rashford, or Anthony. Because look, Sancho is a quality player in himself. Look, we were talking on the last podcast about how he's hard done by not getting into the England team, but we will get to score predictions, Phil. Now, last score prediction, we actually all got the result right, which was good. Lee Lawrence did predict a 9-0, which we all know that one. But Phil, give us your score prediction for Sunday's derby.
Yeah, so I've gone for a score draw. I've gone for a 2-2 draw. I think it's going to, be one of them games which is quite open. I did go for, the three of McTominay, Eriksen, and Bruno, because I'm, somebody who wants to get forward and score goals. I think you obviously went for a little bit more defense-minded with Casemiro.
I went for more counter-attack, I think. That's what I went for.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be one of them games where it's going to be, end-to-end, and we're going to sort of try and catch them on the counter. So I've gone for a 2-2 draw, which I think, would be a fantastic result, and definitely something to build on, because Man City, again, are a fantastic team. But they are susceptible at the back, and we have seen, teams that have shown this. Villa did it, and Newcastle. So I think we've definitely got the capability of getting something out of the game. Yeah.
So if Phil's gone with a 2-2 draw, and that would be, I'd be absolutely sweating if that's the case. That'd be very nail-biting encounter. Lee Lawrence has gone 2-1 as well. Obviously, he's not here today, but he's gone with a 2-1 United win. And also, I've gone 2-1 United as well. I do think it'll be a cagey affair, like Phil said. I think, I think it's going to be an entertaining game. I think it's one of the biggest derbies we've actually had in quite a few years. Considering both teams going into the game we're on form, there's no team out of form going into the game. And I think for me, like, that's where it's interesting for me, and that's where I'm interested to see kind of how both teams go and kind of how they both react to adversity. But yeah, any goal scorers, Phil, in your 2-2?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for Rashford. Obviously, just picking up the Player of the Month award. We touched on it, confidence, and I think he's been, brilliant this season. Miraculous turnaround from what he was like at the end of last season. So I'm hoping he can carry on some good form. So I'm going to go for Rashford. I'm going to go for Eriksen. I think his performances have warranted a goal. He scored some great goals for Denmark. And I think, he's technically, one of the best players that we've got. I think he's going to score a set piece. I think he's going to score a free kick. So I'm going for Rashford and Eriksen.
My 2 goal scorers, I'm going to go for the crack. I'm going to go Lisandro Martinez. Just from a set piece, I think that would just be poetic. Considering Carragher's article today about how he's not physical enough to deal with Martinez, I think that would just be poetic justice. And yeah, I'm going to go with Marcus Rashford as well. He loves a big game, especially loves the Etihad as well. So look, let's hope he can keep that run going and United do get the 3 points. But however, the most important thing I think for this game, not even the 3 points, I think it's the performance. I think it's the fact that these players, look, if they do face a bit of adversity, that they don't give up, that they stay in it, they continue to work rate, they don't down tools. I think that's a massive thing for me this weekend, considering how we last season's game that you had, we played so well for a long period, and then 1 or 2 goals went in and they just dropped heads, and all the organisation went out the window. So I'm hoping from that perspective it's a way better performance. But we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thanks very much everyone who tuned in live and who will listen on the replay. Don't forget to smash like the video and hit that subscribe button on YouTube, but also on our audio platforms as well. And look, we will be back next week, because not only will we have Derby to review, we'll also have, it'll be a double header, because we have to review the Europa League game as well, and against Omnia, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And we'll also have to preview West Ham, so our show next week is going to be packed with a load of talking points. So do make sure to tune into next week's show. And as always, you tune into our other podcasts as well here on Talk Devils. But thanks very much, everyone, for watching this evening. And look, I hope you have a good weekend. And let's hope the Red Sea was proud on Sunday. But until then, guys, thanks very much, and we'll see you later.